start off, I wanted to do like a quick brief about git ignores. So, like with Android Studio, it will automatically generate a git ignore file, and so I'll just kind of like I want to break down how they work, perhaps. So git ignore is basically saying, okay, don't include these files in your repository, and so they can be any sort of file. So like you see these .dsstore or .external native build. That's saying like the file extension. Ignore all files with that file extension. You have star.iml. That is every file that ends with iml. This is like the same way to write the same thing a little bit. And then you also have directories. And so like you can, if you want to exclude a file from the git ignore file, so let's say I wanted to ignore Gradle W, right? So I could do Gradle, yeah, or okay, how about this? Instead of doing something that's really obvious, I'll do like the app IML, okay? So if I find it here, yeah. Okay, I should have picked something smaller, but okay, we'll just do Gradle W. See, it pops up in GitHub. And so if I add something to my git ignore, Gradle W, save it, and I go back, it's gone. Like it's no longer showing up. And you're like, oh crap, like what if I actually wanted to keep that? The way you can exclude files specifically is just adding a whack right in front of it, and it will always include it, even if it matches some other regex of should be ignored.
What do you put in front of it? I'm sorry.
Exclamation point.
Okay.
Sometimes it's called a whack. I don't know. It depends. So you don't need an extension with your file if it's a file that doesn't have a file extension. So yeah. So I don't know. That's like the fastest way I can explain some of that stuff. Any questions on that?
When do you have to define your path? What's the scope of the directory that?
So it's like whatever the git ignore file is in. So if your git ignore is in the root folder, so that example is the one in, right? I have the git ignore open. So anything like above and below, like yeah, anything in the current and sometimes recursively like access folder. So like app has its own git ignore. So that's just the way that one kind of works. So, but you could just add /app/ if you wanted to. But usually it's like the current folder. You can have many different git ignore files for different folders. Any other questions on that? Okay. And then
since she wants to ignore the
it doesn't need a doc.
I mean,
It's just
yeah, but I would just
like it doesn't even have an extension.
Yeah. Well, okay. If you haven't had a git ignore in your GitHub project for like any assignment, I would go onto the Android. Like if you just Google git ignore, there's like a whole, well, not that one, GitHub/git ignore. Right? They have a ton of different git ignore templates that you can just pull from, and then you just rename it .git ignore and remove the first part of it, and then it'll work. So there's an Android one right here. And it has all you need. So, sweet. And then I also want to do a really quick like debugger kind of lesson, because I think that it would be helpful, especially on this assignment. So let me think what minute this okay, so guys don't have to follow along, as in you don't have to have the same exact project open, but it's more like visually I want you to follow along. So there are breakpoints that you can add in Android Studio. So that's what this red dot is. You just click to add or remove them. Really easy. And then if you're going to run a debug build where you want to have those breakpoints enabled, you have to click the run button that has like an ant, I guess is the technically correct icon. Or you can do like run debug app. Okay, and this works for all like projects. So you would hopefully have your emulator open so you don't have to wait. But other than that, like you just launch the emulator, we wait. I think. And like, how many people have done debugging in Eclipse? Cool. It works the same exact way, except
That's usually how mine works.
Great. All right. That's okay. Why was it failing? Sometimes the build profile. So I think last week I kind of covered that sometimes that is a little bit of a trial and error process. If this doesn't work, I'll just. Okay, cool. Alright, so now I'll just run it as a debug build. So you do run, then debug app. Okay, and it does slow your computer down a lot. So it has to wait, and then as soon as it hits a breakpoint, which I had one right away, it will pop up this window. You can kind of see up at the top where it wrote, there's a little check mark next to it. You get the stack trace on the left of like what function you're in, what line you're on. And then you have the list of currently instantiated variables. So we have a button and an image view, save instance, save signal. And this is like to the scope of your like current class. So you can't necessarily look at things that are in like the landing activity. It would all be null, but like these are things that are instantiated for your current context. And you can see what all of these values are set to. So this is kind of important. Like, does anyone have any questions on? I guess I'll cover one other thing. So like, you have kind of a couple functions that you can use. You have step over, which goes to the next line. You have step into, which goes into that method call or declaration. You have a forced step into if for some reason you're not able to, and you have step out, which will go one level up. So like if we go like into glide, it will go into the glide request manager. And you can go as far down as you want, but I don't really want to go through how that works, so I just do step out, and it's moving on to the next part, which is mode. Any questions on that? Or like how to use the debugger, not necessarily this example of like what I'm going into. Cool. So no problems on the assignment, right? Alright.
How are we supposed to turn in the write-up for that? We just put that in the repository, or?
Yeah, I guess just make it a text file and then like submit that. Okay.
There's no submit for the text file. You have to put it in the
Yeah,
project.
just put it in GitHub.
Okay.
Cool. Alrighty. So, are there any other questions before we get into our topic for today? Alright. So we're gonna cover threading. So we've kind of hit the limit of what we can do with just activities and stuff like that, and so we need to start getting into more complex topics. So I figured what better one to start than with threads. So who here has done any kind of simple threading for Java? And okay, so it works very similar to Java. The difference is in Android, there's kind of two primary ways to do it. You can use handlers. And handlers with runnables. And this will make sense in a minute, I promise. And then we have async tasks. Okay, so, but at a high level, threads work the same in Android that they do in Java. So if you don't know what threads are, they're basically they're a highway for your code to run. So in Android, the default thread is the main/UI thread. So all of your onCreate, your button clicks, when you are changing the text of something, that's all being run on this UI thread. And the way that the Android operating system manages those is it has a message queue. And so basically you have a queue of operations of what will be run. So maybe we have a set text, handle an on-click. And it could be many, many, many things. You can actually get to the point where Android will start skipping render frames. It will stop rendering the UI temporarily while it runs through this queue. Because in here there's also update view or /refresh, right? And so this needs to be called every 60 seconds or 60.
6 times in a second? 60 frames per
6 times
second?
in a second. My bad.
Or 60? 60 times in a second.
Yeah, I don't know what that would be, but it's fast. So that function is also being, it's run on the UI thread. So you are sharing this with all of the main operating system stuff that is running to keep your application alive. And there's certain things you can't change the text or call an on-click from a new thread because that's just the way that Android works. So, but there are certain things that you will do, file I/O. If you're saving a file or reading data from a file, you can't run that on the main thread. It's a really bad practice. You can't even do network operations on the main thread because it will complain and say, hey, you're on the main thread, this is bad, and we're just not even going to let you run your application because you would have to sit here waiting for the 1.5 seconds it takes to make an API call. So you are just clogging up the queue at that point. Yeah?
So each activity has its own queue that calls its own methods within that.
No, they share it. So,
Okay, so they share this one queue.
Yeah, so the main UI thread runs all instances of activities because when you are creating a new activity, it's still being run on the UI
It has to
thread.
be called.
Yeah, it's basically the function here would be oh, create a new activity, render that activity, and then it would call your previous activity on pause and then on destroy, all this stuff. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions? So in terms of what I'm prepared to talk about, I have handlers and runnables. I have 3 examples that we can try and play around with. And async tasks are what you use to call APIs. I'd love to get to that. But we'll see how handlers work. You might actually be able to call APIs from a handler, but we'll just have to try it. So I think that's mostly what I have for threads. you have a main thread. That's the default for all operations in Android, and then unless you explicitly call a new thread, it will not run on something different. I guess the only other thing I'd like to call out is that in Java, you have to start threads, but then Java will handle the cleanup of them, so you don't have to explicitly say kill this thread or stuff like that. If you do have an application hang or like a deadlock, like there's special cases for that. Stack Overflow is probably better equipped to answer your question on that than I am, because it's like those are always a case-by-case scenario. I guess, okay, one other question. By show of hands, who knows what a thread safe operation is, or like how to build things thread safe, roughly? Okay, so
Using locks.
to review, right? Yeah, you can use locks. I don't know. I'm lazy. I don't do that. So basically, the way I usually do it is I have my threads, and then the only way they can interact with the actual data is I have some like update, like blank on the function on the UI thread, and then this just calls update. So you can kind of build this pattern, and I'll show it in like examples, but like we're not going to get to this probably right away. But basically in your thread you can do something and then pass that data to an update function on the main thread that will run when it's called. But I don't know a better way to explain that. But like, yeah, there's alternative approaches to locking. Yeah, so just as like a really high level, so Android doesn't just use the default thread, they have this thing called a handler thread. And so actually creating a handler that runs on a separate thread, you do this. Wow, so easy. You just have to pass it in like a string that is honestly ignored by the operating system, but it's human readable, so that's the benefit to you. So there's that. Does anyone have any questions so far, by the way?
Will you upload these slides?
Yeah, I'll show you. Okay, handlers. So we're gonna slow down a bit too, because like I think it benefits to understand how these work. So how many of you have tried running a for loop or a while loop in Android? Show of hands.
I know.
All right. So if we are, I mean, we could just do it. Why not? That would be fun. So I'll just go back to this inactivity, and I'm going to comment on this. I'll put this on GitHub as well. But so while I equals 1,000, or actually let's make it a really big number. So 100,000, right? So while I is greater than 0. I minus minus. Okay, so I'm going to run this, right? And it may be really fast because you can never tell how fast operations will go. Of course, it's amazingly fast.
Need some output.
Yeah, that's true. I minus minus, and then, just to make this more complicated, I equals I times I over 2. Right? I'm just trying to come up with random crap that might slow down.
I feel like that'll speed it up.
Alright, we'll do plus.
I hate it when my computer's too fast.
I know, right? It's like I'm trying to demonstrate something slow down.
I need to break this thing down.
Okay, alright. We're gonna do thread.sleep. Don't ever do this. Alright.
I couldn't get that to work.
Remember, kids, don't try this at home.
So as you can see, my hello world is not there. So right now, thread.sleep is being called every time the while loop runs, which if you're emulating like the process of file input output, like that's an accurate kind of like thing that will happen. Like it takes a long time to write to disk, like way faster than it is to read and write from RAM. So like right now, I can't do anything on my UI. I'm like literally stuck. Like I can go out and I can't even go back to my application because that's going to be run again, and it's like it's just stuck, and you have this great user experience. So like while loops and for loops, unless you know exactly how many times they're going to be run in your application, you should almost never use them because it's just not a good approach. I say that explicitly because if you have something that you need to loop through, like let's say you have a list of like items, right? And you know that this list can't be more than 150 items, right? Maybe that's the limit. It's totally okay to do a for loop because there's not another good way to run it. Like if you just need it to output something specifically before the person does anything else, you have to use a for loop at that point. And you'll kind of see this in the next assignment because just so you know that also the assignment 3 is due on Saturday. I don't know if anyone picked that up, but it's because I posted it a day late, so I was like, that's not fair to you guys. So
I do appreciate it. My Saturday is my work day, so when it's posted late, it actually really helps.
all right, cool.
Thank
Well,
you.
so hopefully I get this next assignment spec written up by tomorrow because Friday is just a nice clean day. But I don't know. If not, if it's on Saturday or Sunday that I post it, then that's when it'll be due a week from then. All right, so I'm really kind of bored sitting here watching a black screen. So yeah. So okay, that's why you shouldn't run stuff on the UI thread, right? Because it will freeze everything. But everything runs by default on the UI thread, so, well, okay, what if I did want to sleep? Okay, that's a bad example, but like, let's say I do want to, like, run something every, 5 seconds or something like that, or if I wanted to, like, run something 20 times, or like, just always run something. I wanted to always have my function that's being called in this queue every second to refresh some data. Well, there's these things called runnables that it's an interface. I could just bring up my code for that. So that's tiny, but so runnables, they function off of an interface. So the only thing that you have to do to make a runnable is you have to override run. So you could create a new object that will serve as your class, right? Like if you create if you have a public class my runnable implements the only thing that you'll have to implement is the override for run. And then all the things you need to do, just go in your run function. So if you want to, log output, hello, right? Like you can do that in here. Or if you need to, like, it's kind of like you use these in order to like do intensive operations outside of like you don't have to immediately do them. So it's like they're running on this queue of messages, but it's like it's going in places that aren't going to interrupt the standard workflow. So like now I have my like hello runnable. Run it just like you would with thread, right? Like you can use it like a for loop. Like if you have this runnable, we have a delay amount, right? 2000. It runs in milliseconds, so I guess I'll explain this. So does anyone have any questions on what the runnable interface is for?
That's how we could create some threads in Java 3 when we were running over threading as we created runnables.
And then we use it for our web crawler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's good.
In fact,
So did you guys use
Yeah.
handlers? I think
How do
that's
y'all
actually-
remember that
that's
shit?
the thing.
I don't know what
Okay.
it's called. I know
So
the
the second
concept.
part of
I
this
know
is
if I look at
handlers.
it.
And handlers are basically the thing that keeps track of like this queue. So handlers consist of like the thread that they're running on, which defaults to the UI thread, and then it also has something called a looper, which I'm abstracting to this queue concept because that's basically what it does. Is you have this like loop that is consistently running, and you're passing stuff in for it to run, as well as everything else. So handlers provide you with the way to do that. Almost always, you will be using handlers with runnables. So that, yeah.
So any class that implements the runnable interface, we can just basically
Well-
substitute for like a for loop, just because it's got thread safety in there.
Sort of, yeah. It's like basically your like implementing runnable will give you access to this function, and then like if for some reason something needs to call run at the handler, it will just look for this function and only run that. But in this like class, you can have variables that you create. Like in this example, right? I have a boolean keep run, and this implements runnable. It has a boolean that's private called keep running, defaults to true, and I keep a reference to the handler. So in this case, I'm passing in the handler to the constructor that I'm going to run this on, and I have a way to kill it. I just set it to false, right? And then in my override, I have a hello, and then if I'm supposed to keep running, I post this again by a certain delay amount, and then I'll go to the Java class for this.
What's post delay do again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, give me a second.
Patrick, for the web crawler assignment, we extended off a thread instead of
Thread, yeah,
runnable.
that's what I'm
So post is just, with handlers, you have three ways you can do things. You have, two main ones. So like you have handler dot post, and this will run it like at the top of the queue. It will just immediately say run this. And then you have handler dot post delayed.
So like run it after or something.
Yeah. So run it after how many milliseconds? So if you wanted to like open this is not the right way to do it, but if you wanted to have a splash screen, right, and you wanted to wait 2 seconds before going to the next page, you would use like a handler. You could use a handler. Yeah.
Could you kind of use it for updating your screen every certain amount of seconds?
Yeah. So if you wanted to like move an object, like let's say we had, I could just show you, I guess, but like if you wanted to move a text view across the screen, like a scrolling bar, right? You could use a handler to change the margin for that. So
Is there one handler in your application that isn't really one?
So you can create many runnable, or you can create many handlers for the same thread. So they're really just like a way that you can interact with those threads.
Why would you have multiple?
Maybe if you have different runnables, so like you would want to post. I mean, you actually can't articulate whether or not that's the right approach. I would probably try to separate the number of handlers by a function. So like, I try to pair them really tightly together, but I guess there's no reason why you don't. You could just pass different runnable objects into it. It's just kind of your preference at that point.
Is there, I was just wondering if there's a difference when you instantiate different handlers. What's the point of having a different handler object? And other than that, it's the only structure you have, unless you make any changes to it, it's going to be the same idea. It's holding different things.
Yeah, I
So
think
it's still going to answer Q.
so. Yeah, not actually the right way to answer that question. Like I'm trying mostly to just think of like the right way to explain how to use these things, like how to use post and post delayed. They're necessary for certain things. Okay, so how about this? Okay, so we'll make a Hello World application, and we just to try it out. Like I want people to at least see how handlers can interact with your code, and like I think what will be helpful is like maybe let's expand it so that it's not just the Hello World, but like instead you can check some condition. So like if you want to open your like guessing game project or anything that you're taking in input and try to run an automatic validation check. So like the way that would work, right, is like so like what you're gonna do is we're gonna have some activity that contains an input field, and we're gonna have like in that activity you'll have a button that is like disabled, so it has enabled false. You're going to check a condition. This is what we're going to do together. I'm not going to like force you to do it on your own. Check the condition of the input field. If true, enable the button. Okay? And we're going to have a handler that will check the condition every 1 second. Okay? So if you're going to try it on your own, usually like 30 seconds to like write that down. Does anyone have any questions so far? Has anyone lost? Alright.
I think seeing it will help a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to. Don't. Yeah.
To me, that's the handlers are just sort of communication between threads. That's it. So you're passing information from the threads to the background thread that you're creating, the main UI thread, to send and retrieve information.
It's like it's more of like your handler. You're only interacting through that handler, so that's how you are running things. Like you can create a handler that points to the main thread, but then the only thing you're doing at that point is you're running the handler. You're running the runnable code with
It's hard when
yeah,
you work
so
on
it's
a
like,
computer and you go home on a computer.
also, if you're working out on your own, please do not talk because like I want it to stay quiet so as I'm walking through it, people can hear. Okay, so today is okay, we're gonna do handler. Okay, just literally build it like you would a default Hello World application. It could be 5.0 SDK. Okay, can anyone not see my screen? Cool. I have bad eyes, so I figured I'd ask. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open my main activity, the layout file. and I have this text view, and I'm just gonna move it to the top, and I'm gonna change it so it says like please enter a number, or maybe enter some
Hate you,
like
Android
some
Studio.
text. Okay.
Yeah, it goes weird. Just delete it. Just delete all the text because it autofills the time you wanted something.
Yeah. All right. Please enter text.
You just press enter. Change it.
No, it did it to me as well. No, you just click out of it.
Click out of it. It doesn't work.
All right. I feel like I'm totally screwing up my layout. That's okay. All right. Let's see. Cool. And then I want edit text,
E.T.
and I'm going to use the plain text because I want to be able to write my own like logic for this. So it'll default to name. I don't really care.
Text entry.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I can put it in there. I've been doing it good.
Yeah.
Text side.
It's all good.
It's all gravy.
Straighten that. Cool. I should probably assign this a name. So we'll do message edit text. Okay. So really simple. It's literally just those two things. So main activity. Now on create, we'll do the same kind of thing. Locate views and find data. Alright, I'm going to get a reference to my edit text. So then, the text find view by ID r.id.message edit text. Cool. So just get the reference to it from your layout file, and then find data. This is where we're going to add the handler.
Can you slow down a little bit, please?
Yeah. Oh wait.
You write that 30% of the class is confused app yet?
Who wants an extra credit project? It's like 5 points.
To do what?
5 assignment points for building this app.
I think we could build
Alright.
that, you should pass the class
Yeah,
before.
cheap. Alright.
I'm down. I'll do 5 extra credits. Do that. I don't have time to build it.
I guess the only other thing I'll call out is up here, I did create a class variable to store my edit text. It's a good approach to get into. You don't want to be calling find view by ID a million times in your code. So especially now that we're getting into handlers, you should try very hard not to put find view by ID in your runnable, because that will just like tank your performance. Even though I can't get that to reproduce, but that's okay.
Can't get what?
I can't get the slowdown to happen. I'm too efficient. So
I'm just too good.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
It's
No,
the
You
Mac.
run it on Jeremy's laptop. He upgraded his RAM. It's not that slow now.
It's still pretty bad. It's because it's an i3.
Alright, let's refocus, guys. Come on. Alright, I'm gonna continue because I've been waiting here. Alright.
It's better.
Alright, we're gonna create a new handler object. So handler equals new handler. Wow, that's so descriptive. Alright.
How do you get yours to do the alt enter? Are you clicking alt enter like as you're typing it, or is it automatically
if
doing it for you?
if it suggests something, you hit enter
Oh.
to complete the object.
That's on Mac. That's a
Um,
function on Mac. There's probably one in Windows, but I
no,
haven't
you
found.
can do it in Windows too.
You have to be on. You have to be clicked on it, and then you can hit Alt Enter, and it'll import it. But with yours, you're able to do it on the fly. Ours, we have to go back.
I'm sorry. That sucks.
I'm switching to Mac just for that.
Yeah, that's where.
Then why not?
I was noticing that on other Macs too. Is that you just start typing in Alt Enter, and it's
And the cool
I'll just
multi-path
type it then.
transitions.
I'll join the club, but you shouldn't actually need to support runnable. So you can do runnable equals new runnable, and then.
Oh wow, that actually auto overrode the thingamajig.
It works.
Yeah, oh, I know, very technical.
So I believe that Android actually provides you with a default runnable like abstract class that you override something, but who knows. So now we have our two objects, and just before we get too deep into the run code, below this curly brace semicolon that ends our runnable implementation, I want you to write handler like the object dot post, and then we'll do runnable, right?
Doc your head. Thanks. Doc.
Duck, duck.
Alright,
Duck.
cool. So maybe just to see what this does, well, for starters, we'll just do a toast, right? Toast.makeText.
Where's the booze?
Get application context. Hello from runnable. And then I'll just do like toast.lakeshore. Hold on. Alright. And dot show.
I always forget the dot show.
Yep. It bites you enough times that you just start remembering it. So. Alright. And then
Mine doesn't have
I'm going to move this on the left side so you guys can still read it. Hopefully. Alright, then if I hit run, my code is still up on the right side so you can see it. But just want to show, you run it and it says hello from runnable immediately. Because we're not delaying the amount of time that it's going to post that. It's not going to wait any longer than it has to run. Yeah.
Which Android class are you looking for?
It should be like Java, or not. It's android.os.handler.
If you pull up before you pull up the activity, would you actually get the toast before that? Start the toast before the activity was pulled up?
Oh, that? That's a good question. So let's just try it. Because right now, we're not doing anything special in find data. So after set content view, it's probably going to be really hard to see this because they both render almost instantly. But
Yeah.
It's a little bit. You can tell a little bit.
Yeah. Like as it's sliding up, the toast is already there.
have a great day, guys. Use the debugger.
Force close.
Alright, so pause this here, and then go down one. Doesn't work. Cool. I think it's like it's freezing the UI code, so like it won't continue on. But if we just hit like if we just comment this out, it would still appear. Like comment set content view, because that's what renders your layout file.
Yeah.
Come up.
It did.
I'm gonna undo this. Yeah. Alright, does anyone have any questions so far? Alright, so let's just delay this. So
Post delay.
I would recommend that you make like an integer or like something up at the top, like in your class scope, delay amount equals, and this isn't milliseconds. Keep that in mind. It is in milliseconds.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. It's not seconds. So really quick. So then once
What
you
was
have that delay amount up in your field, I guess is the right term.
Would you make that a constant?
You can. I don't know. Yeah. Yes, you can make it constant. I don't know. You don't have to.
Okay.
Especially if you're going to change it based on certain things. So post delay, do runnable, and then you technically would make int, but I think you can still do it. Yeah. You can also pass in a long, so that's an option too.
And if I
So actually, instead of 1,000, because that's not really that much time, we'll do like 5 seconds, right? So 5,000 milliseconds. Go run. Back to our emulator.
lightning build.
Just keeping track of time.
Yay! Maybe 3,000. It's just a little bit different.
Post it for a few seconds.
I like the lightning build. Do you know about the lightning build?
Nope.
If you're already running your emulator and you make a couple changes, hit lightning build, and if it can get away with changing the code while it's still running, it will. Otherwise, it will.
Jeff was pointing out that there's like more than just post and post delayed. There's also like post at front of queue, which we were talking about. We would just run it at the very beginning rather than post. We would just kind of fit it in at the next available slot. You can do post at time, which I assume you would pass in a date time. I don't know. I've never done that, so.
You have like different activities for different times a day.
Looks like it's uptime of the application.
Like Pokemon reading.
Yeah, like
for like 5 minutes or something.
The night version of your app.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
you
kind of
could.
weird.
Yeah. So I don't know. Those are like things you can play around with. I honestly feel like the two most familiar ones that I use are post and post delay.
We run into issues with post in front of you with the UI there.
Object
I don't
tokens.
necessarily know that you run into issues so much, but it might, like, if you are relying on some fields being available here, like, if you just do post, you might have some convenience. Like, if you call locate views up here, and then you call your run function, then you have some, like, leeway because you have that ordering.
Well, you can just put it to sleep until it receives an update from another thread.
Kind of, yeah. It's like, it's mostly, I don't know if sleep is the right term for it, because it's really just relying on this queue operation, and then it will check, like, if it has, like, a post delayed, right? It will still check and see, okay, has my delay timer gone to 0 yet? And then it will run it if it has.
I think I was thinking more of the wait, where it waits for like a lot to be released or something like that. So like you're waiting for data to be updated.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the term was in Java though.
It was the .wait on those threads.
Oh, dot wait. You're right. It is dot wait.
So if you post delay
I was thinking wait like
before
like
your
that.
activity name, so it would actually. Yeah.
No, because
So
are you talking about post delayed this part?
No, post delay on your current, would it actually just hold the screen until some amount of time, but then move on to the code? Is it like sleep in that way, or is it actually just moving past it until the delay?
It's like it's moving past it until that delay timer's up, and then it adds it to the operations. So it's like it's not going to wait for everything else. It's going to just say like, okay, continue running everything else, and then once my timer's up, it will run. It'll do post, right, and it'll just add it to the next slot. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's only long.
So when it moves it in the, you're saying it moves it in the queue, or does it actually just say?
It's like, okay, you'd have like a timer, right? That is like it would be continuously, like maybe your timer is like, okay, timer minus, is timer less than, or is like, is it equal to 0 at that point? If not, put it back in the queue, kind of thing. So it's like, it's not necessarily looking,
Yeah,
Okay.
so I was just wondering, so when it moves into the queue, how does it know when the delay has happened, right? What's really keeping track of it, right? Does it move a timer after each thing in the queue and determines, hey, this thing's done as the time expired, or how close does it really get? Or is there just something that's constantly sitting there on your processor that's literally just like, yeah, no, and just constantly back and forth on that, or what? I mean, it is just a conditional comparing two things. It wouldn't take a lot, but I mean, it is something that with enough of them, you could really slow yourself down if it's constantly checking, or if it just assumes that as it goes through different things, it will wait its time and then check the conditional. So just curious.
Yeah, I mean, you have to also recognize that, like, even if you are saying, like, sleep this thread, you are, like, no matter what, you're still doing, like, a rough equivalency of the number of operations, but it's, like, because if you have, like, let's say,
I'm not advocating for sleep.
no, I know. I'm just trying to think of, like, the right way to explain it. So, like,
I like sleep.
like I don't necessarily know how the post delay is implemented. I just know that it will wait a certain amount of time. So like my thought of like how you could build it is like you would have a this is a really bad way to do that actually, but like so you could make a post or you could make a runnable that has like a handler that it was created on. Right? And then it will run. And oh yeah, this also has like some int, right? The delay amount. And so in this run, it has like int minus, and then it will check if int is greater than 0, handler.post. Like, this is obviously not how they implement it, but you could do something like this, and it's not necessarily going to slow down your application. It's just going to bog down your queue at that point. So it's like, this is probably not how they implement it. But, like, even if you have a timer, there's always going to be something that's checking that condition. And so something is going to have to run. So, like even when you're doing thread.sleep, it's doing some amount of work to keep track of how long it's been sleeping for. So
Right.
yeah.
So is there a chance it won't be exactly 5 seconds? It'll be 5 seconds till that's to the queue, and then it has to get to that point in the queue. So there's a chance the stuff in the queue could take longer, which at the speed the device is going is probably not even noticeable, but hypothetically it could be long enough that it would be more than 5 seconds.
Yeah, you shouldn't rely on something to be an exact amount of time using handlers and stuff like that. I mean, just in general, like all of the code that you're writing, you're doing rough approximations of the amount of time that's going to go by before you are running something. As a normal user, you're not going to run into a situation where you're like, oh man, if my page doesn't load in half a millisecond, I'm going to be so pissed. Like, it's usually like, you're just waiting and hoping that it loads at the right time. So, I mean, that's like the only way I can describe it, because the only operating system types that you have control over how this queue is like prioritized and ran and stuff like that is a real-time operating system, and almost no mobile device uses a real-time operating system. Actually, no consumer devices in general use them.
That should be our capstone.
It definitely should, because yeah, they're all CLI based, like everything you do. So
We'll take down Pixel 2. Caleb, start working on that.
I got you.
So does anyone have any questions so far about like what we've done? Because like so far all we've done is like
Create a
delay
thread and put it on the queue.
Like, I guess any questions?
Let's download a file.
All right, we can get to that. I think we're gonna take like a 10-minute break though.
Woot! Because I gotta pee anyway.
All right, so 10-minute break. Come back at 8. And so they have an API. And so in this example, it's like I'll write it down the URL, but it's like like HTTPS www.recipe. Company.com, right? .com /API / and then you have to do get parameters, so you do question mark q equals and then the name of something. You could just send it and it's recipes that either include that food, put apple, that's the ingredient, and it returns this JSON object with all of that data. And if you have like a text editor you use, you could, some of them have this pretty boring things, and you can see the format that your data comes back in. So you can do the same thing in Postman though, right? So if I put in the URL that I put there, and it's a GET request, right? So I don't need to change this, and I don't have any authorization that I need to do. So you just put in the URL, hit send, and it will return like that. It'll give you the time it took, the status, like if it was a good request, and then it will have the data down here. You can get it raw, pretty, like all of this stuff. Like you have like some different ways you can do it. And if you select JSON, it will appear just like it did that. So
this is just a way of interacting with APIs.
yeah, it's good for like testing to see if an API is up as well, because sometimes like if I go here, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to. Yeah, well, okay, it works, but I'm not gonna put the password. Yeah, so while I'm debugging this issue, unless you guys want to watch, please download Postman and try going to that URL and seeing if you can pull up a recipe, or you can do it on their website. I don't really care either way. So really quick, take any pictures you want of the URL, because then I'm going to go back to debugging. And if you guys want, I can debug out loud. That way you guys can at least hear my thought process on why this is breaking.
It's a good thing it's not me trying to debug it. I'd probably be cursing.
But basically what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to fix this async task helper that I built so that it will return a string value for you, so you don't have to try to learn how to do all that. It's very complicated. But I can kind of explain how async tasks work as I go and try and fix it. Cool. So as like a high level, right? So async tasks are similar to handlers, except like not really. Like they start on a new thread, and they are like anonymous implementations of, or they're not anonymous, but they're like implementations of something called an async task, which takes in 3 parameters or parameter types. So you have like the parameter, the progress, and the result. So like what you pass in, what you can get back in progress, and the final thing that's passed back. And the only thing you need to implement for an async task is this do in background. And you'll notice that string ... that's Java's way of saying a variable number of arguments. And string that's the name of the parameter.
Is that like string args?
Kind of.
Because arg seems to grow and shrink even though it's a regular array.
Yeah, so this is like an array of n type. So like basically, like if you create a normal array, you have to declare the size, or if you create a list, and that's like a full like data collection you have to do. The way this like string ... works, or it's really any data type. You could literally pass in lists ... but don't.
But don't.
So like I have right now just one URL, but I could pass in like URL.
Roll.
And it will always work. Like you can expand infinitely, and you can handle as many arguments as you want. And you can just say like, yeah, you can pass in 20 parameters, but I'm only going to listen to the first one, which is what I do. So that's like a cool, nifty little Java trick. If you don't know that.
Is it basically the same as the string args?
I don't know.
That's what I
It's
was
been-
asking because I
it's
thought
been so
arts
long
can
since I've
grow
done
and
that.
shrink.
Alright, hold on. Okay. So, kind of, I guess. Like, this is an explicit declaration of the number of like parameters being passed to it. I believe I have no thing, like I have nothing. Also, I guess I should clarify, I'm by no means the authority on all of this stuff. Like there are books entirely dedicated to Android concurrency. So like I'm trying to more equip you guys with things you could try out and tools you can use as opposed to saying this is the best way to do it. So I'm trying to give you guys the right approach, but not necessarily the perfect solution. Because at a certain point you don't have a perfect solution. As far as like how Java interprets the args, I believe what it does is it looks for like, so Java, like the name of your program. And then literally I think it just builds an array based off the number of arguments. But it's like a fixed type. Or a fixed size.
At creation.
Yeah, because when you're running this, it's literally kind of reading left to right, and so it can just count those faster than it can say like, oh, like, I mean, I'm sure the ... thing is doing the same thing in the background, but
it's acting more like an array list than it
Yeah.
is.
it's way easier as a developer to just, have a variable number of arguments rather than having to say like, oh, I'm going to create a new array in order to call this function, like lazy developers, right? So
I'm curious if dot has methods like .length.
That's good.
yeah, you can call .length
It will, but then if it's able to grow and shrink, then it's essentially an array list, and it's a primitive
Yeah,
array list.
you do have like the link function, right? Like I really think in the background this is working the same way as the main, but it's like it just looks different and the way you use it is different.
Does it have a get and an add and all that stuff too?
I don't believe so. I think it functions just like an array.
Wow.
So
You just crushed his dream.
hey, it's like a simple way to declare an array, right? But alright, onto the thing. So I'm gonna kind of continue to try and debug this as I explained. But basically, for an asynchronous task, you have this do in background function that does something, right? And you, like, in most cases, you're using an asynchronous task to call an API. So you want a string input, or if you have a URL that you're passing to it, you can do that too. I personally would rather just pass a string. So here, I have this function. It's just using a standard Boolean lambda function that you can check a condition and then assign it a value based off of some, like what that left condition is. So here I'm getting the first item in this like strings parameter, I guess is the right word. And then if it doesn't exist, I'll pass back an empty string. I declare my result and my connection and buffered reader up here. And then in this code, like I'm going through. Do you guys want me to commit this brokenly, like so you can look at it on your screen too, or would you rather just keep walking through it?
Okay, just that's out of here.
Cool. Alright, so I got a crash on mine, so.
No pointer.
Cool. 29.
Red line is the message.
Alright, well, that means this is being run, I think. And because, okay, asynchronous tasks by default run in the background, and they're not running on the UI thread. But you can force them to be synchronous by calling get at the end of it. Well, we'll try this. I just want to see if it will run. And return my the error at least if it's not working. So I'm switching this to void so that I'm not necessarily returning any data. And we're gonna go back here, and I don't print out anything, so I could just comment this out, and I'll just take this like call to my helper class, get data. Okay, this is just a URL to an API that I created. Like really simple. Another quick side, there's this thing called webpack.io, and you can basically build really simple, like small JavaScript APIs that run without a server. So, and it's free. The only limitations is that you can't have something larger than 100 kilobytes, and I mean, there's like some kind of like call limit. I just haven't ever hit it. So, but they have a web editor. The only difference is you need to kind of like understand how they're building their APIs in JavaScript, but I'll post a couple of examples. Alright, next one. Alright, so I'm gonna hit run. I'm gonna open up my monitor because all it's doing is logging. Okay, so it's not getting there. That's okay. So I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna comment out because I had a runnable idea that was just really quick on. I'm gonna try and keep up that maybe will show why it's not working. Alright, so it has a URL, strings. There's one string in there. That's my URL that I tested. Cool. Alright, so I'm gonna go down one. Fine. I create a URL object from it. That looks like it will work fine. Connection. So open connection will basically try to open the connection to that endpoint, and then it will, if it crashes or if it doesn't work, it will set it to null. So quick aside, when I say API, I'm talking about the collection of endpoints. So the recipe copy is the API, but the endpoint is the recipepuppy.com/API/?q equals something. Your endpoint is like where you were going to actually get the information, and your API is the collection of endpoints. Any questions on that? It's like hard to differentiate the terminology, so that's understandable. Okay, set the request method to get because that's what it should be. Connect. Wait. Works. Cool. I can actually expand down here to see what my my response code, which is null. It's not good.
Which means the API is not talking with it.
Yeah, that could be it. I wonder. Okay, let's rather than maybe using the custom API, I'm gonna try the recipe plugin because I at least know this one works. Paste this. Alright, we'll try again. Alright. I'm gonna go down this way down this way. Oh, just kidding. Okay. Maybe don't go that fast. Last cast section. Right. Okay. So some websites are HTTP and not HTTPS. So in this case, that's what it is. So we're just going to change that. All right. Let's try this again. Here I have a while loop. I don't really want to sit through that, so I'm just going to make a new breakpoint and hit run. So now I have in my buffer, I have the return field of that API. So yeah, very readable. You go down, I'm returning nothing, so that's okay. I see the problem. Well, part of the problem.
Yeah, you were returning a null line when it needs to return the string.
Okay, so you guys supposed to return the buffer.
Yeah.
You try this. I don't want this one anymore, and just break one here. So my runnable. Alright, so we're gonna leave everything the same as it was, just to make sure that that's like the right way to, you know, send it back from the buffer. I think it'll work. If it doesn't, that's okay.
You just went straight run, no debugger.
How did I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was intentional. Well, it should be in the log actually, because I think.
Close it, they open it. Close that.
Oh, the two string. And I don't think you put in new. Oh, maybe. Yeah, you probably need a two string.
Alright, this is what I was talking about with the asynchronous thing. So if you do .get, it will turn it into a synchronous thing that you can pull the value from. So then here I have my tests and I have that super long string, right? So copy that, put it here, shoot that. Whoa, it works, right? There's our return from our API. Okay?
That sounds sublime. It's. Man, if you have Sublime, then cool.
But okay, so this is now passing something back. And I do it get. Okay, so I'm gonna try to change this back to return a string. So like I try very much to do this as incrementally as possible. So in here, we're gonna do string s log.i. Okay. So if I run this, go down, and I can see right here, that's where I outputted that. I know that because I removed the other log statement. Alright, and I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to try it. Worst case, show you what I mean by certain things can't be run on the thread. Cool. Alright, you run. Look up that. Hey, check it out. This is the benefit of the handler. So yeah, it outputs your API to a string in set and toast. Okay, I just wanted to get this running. Now I'll share it, and we can go back to our presentations. Because I know there's so much fun. Alright, while that's going, so how did you handle it? Yeah, so, and I'll be honest, like I haven't used handling threads a lot, but they allow you to kind of like have like that, give me 1 second. So like handler threads, to my understanding, give you a way that you can interact with both an asynchronous thread and the main thread. So like I think what happens, and I'm saying I think because I can't necessarily guarantee this, is that like you are creating this handler in the main thread right here, and that somehow gives you a bridge between the main and that new thread that you're running this on, and then you are like so what your runnable when it's called is being run like asynchronously, because here we have get data, and that is like a get query that takes time. It takes like 200 milliseconds, right? It's the single content. So in theory, if you open Android monitor, it will tell you if it's skipped frames.
I thought you weren't doing that for just some particular reason.
And it wouldn't let you run it on the UI thread anyway, but like if you're doing too much work on the UI thread, it usually outputs something that's like, there's too much happening on this. You've skipped 15,000 frames. Not a good thing. So I don't know what else to explain. It's like, so asynchronous threads or asynchronous tasks are run on a new thread, but then our handler thread acts as a bridge between that and the UI thread. Because you can't create a toast in here. You can't manipulate any UI objects in there. But with a handler, you can. Yeah.
I was reading online during the break that it sounds like the handler is really just the go-between because the threads do not have access to the data, and so the handler is there to act as the go-between to get data from one to the other.
Yeah. Oh, it's all before. It's like years on. You can ask them to turn off the front row.
Yeah, so I don't really know the best way to describe this. Basically, you have each thread has a looper, which is like how often the next item is called. Kind of, to my understanding, it's like you have this loop that's continuously running and saying, all right, get the next item, run it, and then get the next item. Like I think that's how. So you have to pass the looper into it. You're creating a new handler. Also, this code's on GitHub if you also wanted a closer copy. So, I guess, the only other thing that I would say is Java by default has a JSON package. So I can do JSON objects. Well, okay, you're going to need to put in a try catch. So try. Let's see. So if you have try catch, also exception key is like the laziest catch in the world, but it works. So you can do JSON object, JSON equals new JSON object, passing your string, and then what's a field? Title, right? Dot.I JSON dot get string title. Okay. About that. So run it. Go to my Android monitor, and here we have the title. So one approach you can take is hard coding all of these titles, like all the different like key value pairs for JSON objects. You can also who remembers creating models for MVC. So you can create a model object that wraps whatever your response is from an API. So okay, but before we do that, maybe who has questions, or raise your hand if you're lost. That's okay, and we've covered a lot, I think, in the past.
So we can have an assignment on this.
Yes, but all right. To clarify, the next assignment, I'm giving you a lot of things that are already done, and I'm giving you targeted locations of where to add functionality. So the app that I'm wanting you guys to build is like a media app where it has your progress on something, and you can add a new media item, and it will pull from an API and create that item in the list.
Like a podcast.
Kind of. I don't know how I'm not done with the assignment yet, but like basically I have this query, right? And
Good job,
it has
He's solving your problem for you.
I just said that because our project in our other class for our team is a podcast.
oh that's cool.
Okay.
I don't know. This is not necessarily a functional thing. It's more of like a see how what you can do. So like
To start.
yeah. So here we have like this. This is the API that I built. My JavaScript's off, by the way. I'm sorry. So you return a data object that contains a media item, and in this I have a URL and a title, right? So I'm just giving you random things for now. And then what will happen is I'm building all this part. I'll tell you what you guys have to build in a second. But basically, there will be this. There will be a view where it has an infinitely scrolling list of items. And then what I want everyone to do is when you click this item, it will go to a detail activity. And then I want you guys to bind to this button to make a request to this API that will return a random media object, and then and then you just format that data and pass the model object into, I'll have some easy way for you guys to add them, and then I'll handle the rest of storing it in this list. Okay. It sounds really complicated, don't worry. It's like, I'm giving you guys 2 tasks, so. And if you get stuck, I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard on the last assignment, if anyone was stuck really. So, if you do get stuck, either come see me on Thursdays or message me on campus. But hearing nothing, I'll just keep making the assignments a little harder. So, yeah.
I had a question back on the ruler. Yeah. Get the looper for that. So, just from my understanding, you could get, if you created another thread that's handling different functionality, you could change the looper for the thread on the handler if you wanted to do that. It would not be
I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't know. There's a book at home that I need to read about Android concurrency. It's that will hopefully shed some light on it, but mostly
just setting a reference to the looper on that thread. So theoretically you should be able to change that and use the same handler.
it depends. If the handler exposes a way to do that.
I also noted I was running into some problems with an exception and decided to go ahead and just do line by line as it started going through the Android code as well. And it gets to the looper, the one that's running this whole thread, this whole application and everything. So
yeah, that's why
that was a lot of code.
Yeah, it gets deep, but yeah. So I don't think there's a way that you can set the looper. You can get which one is currently attached to it, but yeah.
So set looper.
No, there's just get. Any other questions? All right, so I'll just show you guys really quick how to. Well, I showed you how to do JSON.
Insert just link here.
Right, with an API. Yeah, it's the root endpoint, or it's the root of some API. But there's also a list of public APIs if you're interested in playing around with a bunch of random APIs. The only thing I'll say is that every API is different. Read the documentation of how you're supposed to create it, because there's literally no other way you can touch it.
You just have to know
Oh, I have to read now?
I know, right?
I'm out of this degree.
Endpoints can be get or post. You can pass parameters to them. Sometimes you have off keys. You have to do. It's
no put or anything either.
Sorry, get or post. I don't think you can. There's some that I've seen that do put.
Can you do request?
What do you mean? Oh,
Request
there's
is get or post.
I don't know. Here, I don't know.
Calm down.
I mean, maybe.
$. $$underscore request. It's the only way to go. I don't care what I'm getting.
But okay, like
Just take it. Just give me something.
if you can build it in Postman, there's a way to build it in Android. So like as an example, I'm just gonna kind of go over Postman a little bit more because it's like a really powerful tool. So it gives you literally all the options you can want.
Plus some I don't want.
Yeah, exactly. But so if you have headers, right? Usually, if you're passing something up to an API, which
Like keys, authorization keys, and stuff.
yeah, I'm trying to think if you guys are gonna do that. No. All right. Yeah. So, but if you need to, you can do application or sorry, content type. If you're passing something up, right? You do application JSON. So that's the way to do it as your header. And then in your body, usually I do raw because it's just easier. And you do my data. I think you actually have to do both. Like it works literally just like JSON. And then if you hit send, it would work. Although this is not, it would give you 500 error. What? Right, it just ignores it, I guess.
Oh, because it accepts GET.
It'd be
Yeah.
funny if they started talking back to you, like, how are you?
AI.
And then like let's say you wanted to
OpenAI.
save your query that you did, like you have access to this history over here, like you see all of my fun different ones. You can even probably see the thing I applied to for my current job. Which
There it was.
You just passed it up a little farther.
There it is.
That?
yeah. I found a bug in their API. That's where I got my job, I think. But yeah, so you could like it will record all of your stuff. Wow. Alright. Cool. We're not gonna just get down. Get that out of here. Yeah. But okay, so if you want to save, right, what you've done, you can save the requests. You can build collections of these like requests that you've built up, and then you can export them and share them. You can put it in GitHub even, so that everyone has a current up-to-date record of what all of your API endpoints are, and examples on how to call them.
Can you explain the key portion again when you're entering in the key?
For the headers or the body?
Either.
Alright, good. So I guess maybe the better way to describe it is headers are like what is passed to this URL before anything in the body is. So like if you need to pass like an authorization token or a cookie, that's done in the headers. Cookies are kind of handled by Postman, so you get like a nice pass in there. But on Android, you have to do it before you upload anything. And then your body is where your contents of what you're like, any special parameters you need to pass in for like it to run. So maybe I should find an example, but basically you like the common one is content type, and then you put in your value, which is application JSON usually. I've seen XML as well. And then with body, you're just literally writing a JSON object by hand. So yeah, this is the way that one person's API thing is set up. So let's do something fun. Yeah. All right. So
I like it.
hey, your numbers API. Cool. Right. So in here, I'm pretty sure this is just get only, but okay, so this one's pretty simple. So if you read through the URL structure, they talk about the number and type, right? So let's like someone give me a number like that we want to learn about. 8. Okay. All right, and then let's do like trivia for the type, because in this on this URL structure, right, they say pass in a number and pass in a type. And I just assume that the number is the right approach. So 8 is the number of principles of Yang in Chinese calligraphy. Cool. I didn't
What
know
if
that.
accepted my birthday?
Eight is the number of legs attached to like graphics. Like so.
Oh, it
a lot of
changes
these
each time?
APIs are set up
It's
where
random.
you're getting multiple kinds of information.
So when you actually put in like those parameters in the URL, is it like showing you the database that's?
Yeah, I mean,
There's not many.
it depends on how the API is built. So like some APIs, every
Four or
API call is hitting the database. Others, they're fetching like local data on the server. Some of them are just taking your input and then spitting something back out. It's like based upon the thing. So like here, like I'm going to use this as an example because I don't really have the source code for anyone else's. But so here, all I'm doing is saying when you're calling this API, all it's doing is this it calls a callback, right? Which is just a function. And then in here, I'm just creating a new media item, right? So you're not passing anything in. I'm not hitting a database. I'm just literally, as you call it, I'm building this thing. So I didn't get it to work earlier. Maybe I can change it and get this to work. So if I switch this back using this, in theory, I should pass in hello or something similar. Although this is HTTPS, I think, so I need to switch it back. If I hit run, no. Well, I don't know why that's not working. Oh,
Hello, app.
it's just moving slow.
Nice.
All right.
Hello, Moto.
Too fast, too slow.
Sweet. But yeah, so like this is all running. Well, not this one, but the other one is just the same kind of concept. And, you know, it just returns hello, and that's it. Doesn't really do a great job of concept, but so I guess does anyone have any questions on this, or do you guys want to? I don't know if it makes sense to try to query a different, like, how about, okay, for the people who have their laptops out and have Android Studio up, let's try to like buddy up and see if you can query the recipe puppy and see if you can get like a toast or a log to appearing. Or replace the contents of a text view with some piece of data from the response type. Because, or I can show you how to build a model. I feel like there's a lot of options. Who wants me to build a model? Yeah, you want me to build a model object?
Yeah.
All right. It's probably a good start. Okay.
Can we run this though?
Yeah. Well, let me switch it back to HTTP. So we're
Have you ever tried to make an Ajax?
going to switch this so that it is the puppies.
Right, but that's essentially what he's doing. Is he's making an Ajax called a JSON object, and he's already
Alright, so if you want to look at this code, it's under the IT 405 folder, and then it is the in-class folder 1019 handler example, which I'll probably move into an async task example later, but it's in there. Okay, so to start, if you guys don't know this, so packaging is a great way to like separate out your code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my like main directory. I'm going to hit new package, and I'm going to name this model. That's really easy. And then in here, well,
Corey,
so
I don't think you pushed it to GitHub.
I just pushed it,
Oh, did it?
so it might take a second. I'll also push this as we go. Okay, so building a model object is actually not like the most straightforward thing because you have to approach it in 3 different ways. So you get an API request, right? And it returns a JSON object. Speak this way. You get a JSON object from your API request, right? And usually that has some metadata information. So if we look at what the response was of our Apple, right? This one. So we have this title, we have version, href of the base URL, and then we have the results array. So if we want to keep all of this, we have, so this title. I don't really care about the rest of this. And then we're doing results. Okay, so like we kind of have this metadata hub here. So if we want to keep it, we can. You would make a model object called like recipe. I'm just going to shorten it. Meta. And then in here you could do like title version. And then base URL, which is the href. Okay, so that's like our first piece of data. I literally just pick what's in there. And then the thing that I'm actually interested in is the results. So I'm just gonna like do it reverse. But so basically, like from here, you'd have like a recipe. Okay, and that recipe has a title. It has a URL. I'm not gonna like call it href because I don't think that's descriptive. Has ingredients. And that is a CSV, of course.
Thumbnail.
Yeah, it has a thumbnail as well.
All of our model interactions are with a database. Are you just creating like
I think you're right.
an actual object?
The other two classes are
this
not
is going to
here.
be a Java object.
There's
so
two more classes.
Yep, it's just a Java class. Like, the only thing I'm considering right now is I feel like this ingredient should be its own model, and then you should contain it. Like your recipe model should contain a list of ingredients.
That's true.
So Corey,
Yeah.
the project for 1019 only has one class in it, whereas the one that you've been working on has been 3 classes. Oh, what is this? What
Alright,
is this?
You know what? Yeah.
What's this? There's my case. What is this?
Oh, no. It's an online. My bad. That's totally my bad. Alright. So if you go to online, API example, this is where it is. My apologies. Let me know if that shows up.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, it's way easier to interact with objects than it is JSON. So, yeah. So there's also a package called JSON. It's faster. The only difference, or the only reason I'm not wanting to use it right now is that you have to import it. So I'd rather not go through NCL again. So we're doing that all morning. So we're gonna stick with simple. Yeah, but it is better to use the JSON. It's just not my interest right now. Well, it's actually not. I would argue that it's harder, but that's just because I'm familiar with the other one. But this one is slower by like milliseconds. But
Faster is faster.
this is true. But alright. So we're gonna say that ingredients is a list of ingredients with a capital I.
Ingredient objects.
Yep, and then our ingredient object is really simple, right?
Name.
Yep. Ingredient. And this just contains a name.
And a get name.
Hmm?
And a get name method, right?
I just do public for everything, so no. I mean,
Public name.
I think Josh is like twitching to the side right now.
hey, it's a difference, right? If you really need to switch it to protected or private getters, like that's fine. It's just, you know, do that after you know it works. Alright, so I think this looks good. I'm not gonna build this metadata, I'm just gonna build this part. So does anyone have any questions on how I broke down the model objects? Yeah.
Why did you choose each ingredient to just be a string that's an object?
I guess my logic behind that is that, you know, right now it's just text, right?
Yeah.
But
If you're looking for an exact, you would have to type that whole thing
yeah,
without
like,
wildcards.
I thought it was like a little ridiculous. Like if you're trying to like, you know, pull like see what ingredients are being displayed, or like yeah. So like let's say part of the assignment, right, is like this is not part of your assignment, but like let's say you're assigned to create a list of, you know, text objects, like text views that, you know, have these different ingredients. And so it's like, you know, apple cider. And then this one is something else. Like, do you want to split the string when you get it from the API, or do you want to just have it in this nice little model object so you can go, you know, for each ingredient in this list, do ingredient.name.
You could also do checks on, you can put in things like, what do you have? Well, I have cinnamon, I have brown sugar, and I have flour. These are the recipes that have that. You may need one or two more ingredients on top of that.
You could put amounts inside your ingredient object.
Yes, that too.
Yeah, actually that's a good point. Like if this API changed and they gave us more information for our ingredients,
That's the only thing I
So
was thinking
chance.
of, but actually,
Calories.
because otherwise you could still for each on the string.
true. It's just
Hey,
like
I gotta watch my girlish figure, okay?
I don't know. Like I guess in this case you're doing the separation where you're getting the model, you're creating this object, versus at runtime when you need to do this, then you run the operation. So it's like this is already done. It runs once and it does it, versus maybe you need to do this in 3 different areas and you have to do it 3 times.
Besides, calories.
I mean, you could also put the ingredient where the manufacturer is. They can have multiple manufacturers, and each thing has a contain it. That'd be much easier than.
Or like where to buy it.
Hell, you could even have your ingredients be created off of another API.
Calm down, Bones, with the sorcery.
Hey, you know what? Arrays within arrays within arrays, okay?
No,
Trees
it's
within
very
trees.
Bones, how complicated can I make this?
So to make a model object is just like making a class in Java, right? So you right click new and then Java class. Also I right click on my package. So Java class, and then I'm just going to name this recipe.
Sometimes I forget about adult.
I do too.
I might spell this wrong, not me. But, so I have recipe. Let's say I messed up and I made my Java class outside of it. I'm also making class ingredient, so we can store our ingredients. No, this is in the wrong spot. So you can just drag it into the model.
Refactor.
Where'd you get model?
He created the
Created.
package.
Oh, he created.
Right clicked his package.
Right click to package. Okay.
Java class. There you go. Oh wait, you need to create a package. No.
Alright, so it's really straightforward. So it's literally like your best guess on what data type it is. I try and keep it really simple. So like ingredient, we're gonna do public, like string, name. Wow, that was tough.
Josh is twitching.
And you know, if you want to reduce the number of null pointers you get, you can default it to an empty string.
We like no pointers.
No. No, we don't.
Ingredient,
I'm okay with all
string.
I can seem to find them.
Alright, actually, okay, here's the key. If you're creating model objects, you are not passing in the data that you want, right? Because you're trying to pull this data from a JSON object. So your constructor doesn't get past the string. It gets past the JSON object. Okay,
That's good to know.
Interesting.
so this is important. You can also do this as a static constructor. So you can do public static ingredient from JSON. JSON objects. Yeah, JSON. Both of these are perfectly valid approaches and ones that I've used. So
Ever seen that method?
What the heck is that?
Yeah, what?
We had never covered static constructors,
um,
or even private constructors for that matter. We know math has a private constructor.
Not it.
That was static.
Yeah, but math you can't instantiate the constructor because it has a private constructor.
Who wants me to explain how this works?
Okay.
15 seconds. 15-second explanation. Okay. Static just means you don't have to have an initialized object. So right now you're calling ingredient dot from JSON. You're passing it a JSON object, and what it will do is it will return a new ingredient JSON object. Like it's the same thing. You still have to write the code that actually converts it, but it's just like the way you do it is like slightly more convenient.
So you write the ingredient class name dot from JSON.
Yeah, so you could literally do like return, if this is like a private constructor, right? You could do return new ingredient with JSON. So
I can't
I'm
think
still
of
confused.
why I would need to use that.
Just a
you
different
would
way.
need to use, well, you never need to use it, but like there are times that like this is more readable, especially if you're passing.
I can see that.
Yeah, there are times maybe you would want to use this. You don't have to. Like this is literally the same amount of work as making a constructor.
It's not the spoon.
But
that's-
maybe okay. The argument, I guess, you could say from some collection of objects, then that kind of approach of creating it statically would be more helpful than creating a constructor that always takes 15 parameters.
Yeah.
So it's like code style. I don't like it.
Basically, instead of trying to figure out what that argument being sent is, you just have from JSON.
You're gonna need that public now.
Yeah, that's true.
Oblique.
All right. So the thing to know is that anytime you're working with JSON objects, you would have to have a try-catch block. So if they scare you,
No, they just look ugly.
yeah, they are ugly. All right, there's actually another way you could approach it, but we're going to do a simple way for now. So this dot name equals JSON dot get string, and then we know our tag name is well, it doesn't actually have tag name. This is probably a bad example. I forgot because you're creating these ingredients from a CSV string. So this is the one scenario where you actually need a string passed into it. Yep, that's exactly what
Okay.
Alright. So, alright. This is like, it's your approach. It's like, if you want to do a different way, like, I personally, if I'm reading through your code and I see list string ingredients, like, how do I know that that's what you're passing? Like, I don't know. Alright, so this is maybe the better way to do it. So we'll do public, and then we have a string title. Public string URL. And then we have a public list of ingredients. Public string thumbnail. Cool. Alright, so if you
What
want
does
to
that work?
assign default values to all of these, you can. We could practice. Yeah. Also, I don't really know if it matters what kind of list you use. Like, you interact with them, same when you're not building them. So,
I like lists.
List of
Yeah, I like that. Because I've had it 3 times for a sentence.
You can run the array list like everybody else.
I don't know, I think it's less code than array lists.
hey, so try catch, right? If you're wanting to catch the specific exception,
I
it's
was
like
just
a
about to
JSON.
ask that. Ask that.
So JSON exception is the right approach. Yeah, it's never used. So I do this dot
It's not
title
important. Wait, it is.
JSON dot get string, and then I pass in title. I personally have not found a great way to record these like tags aside from literally duplicating every field you have here, which I don't think it's a great approach. So if you have another idea, great. I mean, I guess you could actually put it in your res strings folder. Right. Yeah. In theory, you should only be writing strings. So. Alright, so we're going to do that for all of these. JSON.get whatever data type it is, so get string, except skip over ingredients for now. So URL, and then we do this dot thumbnail equals thumbnail. Oh, my bad. Sorry, JSON.get string thumbnail.
Is
Yeah,
the key get key or is it something
So
else?
this needs to be href actually for the URL. You should bounce back and forth. So it's title, href, ingredients, and thumbnail. Okay, and then for our ingredients, we do public. Sorry, we can actually do this private.
Ooh.
We're going to return a list of ingredients. And we'll do get ingredients from JSON.
So you have to split it by commas.
Yeah, so that's on the right track. So what we're going to do first, go try catch. Cool. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a list ingredient right here, result equals new linked list, because that's what I use. And then I'll do return my result. Okay, at the bottom, outside of your try catch. That way, you guarantee you're at least not past the back and roll. And then in here, we're going to do string ingredient string equals JSON object dot get string. Go back, paste this. That's actually the best approach. Is just literally copy and paste your JSON tag. And then we'll do
String array.
Yep. String array. Ingredient array equals ingredient string dot split. And this is really easy. Comma.
Oh, you're gonna get
Comma
spaces.
space.
Yeah, you're gonna get spaces on that.
Do a comma space.
You never know the data. All right. I'll do that. So comma space. The other approach you just trim it before you.
Comma. So you do that because you don't know the last one if it has a comma at the end or
Actually, that's
like a. Looks like it does. Looks
Nope.
applesauce.
That's not. You
Outside
have
quotes.
outside quotes.
there's always a space. It's really fun. That does work. Alright.
For each and add.
Alright, for each, yep. Then you do result.
Yes.
Dot add.
S, right? No, the ingredient.
S. Log dot e.
Don't you make fun of me?
Test. Something.
Something,
Alright.
something, dark
Actually,
side.
And then you can do e.print stack trace. You can also do e.get message, and that will return like the
Just the
actual
line.
exception message.
Yep, I like that one.
I like print stack trace. I feel like it helps me more than that. But
I like to make it square.
you can also do both. You can literally
So I can
do,
swear back.
you know, something went wrong, space, e.get message. Or you can use string filter, which, if you guys didn't know, is like 1,000 times faster than concatenating string. So,
Is it?
What is?
yeah,
Did not
string
know that.
filter.
Oh, yeah.
No wonder why.
Used that in like one of the last assignments where it was like really slow.
Yeah, Janet Hollier's having their Java 3 students use String Builder, and I was like, I've never used this.
No,
Yeah,
I've heard
okay.
that.
I'll
String
try
Builder
it.
is a class in Java.
So as like a refresher, so the different kind of log types you have is debug, info, and error. So in this case, it would be very appropriate to add error, not info, because you want people to know something went wrong. Say I can do string builder.append, and then something went wrong, and then dot append e dot get message. Get message
Oh, that's a line.
dot
Yeah, you just
yeah two string. Hold on, I'll keep it.
80 characters is what we're
It's a log.wtf.
Alright, in some cases it's faster, but like if you're doing many like kinds of strings, that's more difficult. Builder is faster in some cases. It depends. Alright, so then back in your constructor, you do this dot ingredients equals get ingredients, and then you pass in your JSON object. So easy. Alright, cool. So I'm gonna just quickly go back here, and I'm gonna say right. So something to keep in mind is that this is not a single object; it's an array of recipes, right? So we need to do the similar kind of approach that we did for the ingredients. Sort of. Actually, no, we don't. Just kidding. So we have our JSON object here, right? Okay. We'll rename this to be like the API call result. Okay. So that gives us back this whole object, including that metadata.
But can't you just decode it back into an array? Then you can iterate over it.
Okay, I'm going to show you. So
So you want an array of recipes. So
this is a JSON object, right? So what we can do is get a JSON array, and we do our recipes equals new JSON array, or not, sorry, not new. Your API call result dot get JSON array, and you pass in the name of it. So that's results. Because that's where
That's basically decode. Well, PHP's version of JSON decode.
So I'm gonna make a list.
you get Stack
Equals.
Oh, it's using the same name as the JSON array.
Yeah. Well, besides that, we have to do just do for each. So we'll do linked list. This recipe equals new linked list. And then we'll do a for each. Sorry, JSON array doesn't support for each, so you have to do get I equals 0. I is less than recipe. Okay, for each. And I.
Can you cast it to a list and then for each it?
At least, maybe I'm wrong. I think you might. I don't think you can do it for each on JSON array. Yeah, for each on we'll type JSON array.
What if you tried typecasting it to a list?
Yeah, tell us. Let us finish this product.
If you cast it, it's not gonna cast directly. So
Oh.
it's not really a list. It's like an object representation.
Yeah, so therefore it wouldn't have the
Yeah.
iterable or the interface for
Yeah.
it.
So add, and then we'll do new.
Could make your own, yeah.
From
Yeah.
recipes.
No, not right now.
Get JSON object at I.
Alright, that confused me a second.
Yeah.
Spend that one.
Alright, so we're doing a for each. Sorry, we are doing a for loop, not the for each loop. I have int I. This is incrementing every time we go to the next one, and then we're adding this new recipe that we're creating. And in order to get the data, we need to do recipes.getJSON object
At
at
index.
an index of I. So
Good now.
alright.
It's simple enough.
Okay, so okay, so I'm just gonna add a breakpoint so I can see it rather than. I'm all about that first try. But, alright. I don't care about this one. You passed it already. Alright, we have a breakpoint. And I want to see local variables. I don't remember where they're at.
Build variables, they're on the left.
Build variables.
Variants. Oh, sorry, it looked like variables to me.
Yeah, it's tiny though.
And I'm right here in front of it.
I think you just have to go, there's a debugger tab and a console tab. Okay, so right now I have my recipe list, and it's 10. Okay, so I can expand this. I'll make this a little bigger. So I have my recipe list, that's the linked list that I created. I expand this, you can see my ingredients, there's 7 of them. Apple cider, cool. So you can dig down into all of these different model objects that you created. You have the title, you have the URL. There's no thumbnail for this one. But rather than being, no, it's a nice empty string, so you can fail hopefully a little more gracefully.
Now when I fail, I like to fail hard.
Hey,
I can
you
vouch for
I don't like the bloopers. Hey, does anyone have any questions on not necessarily what to do with that list, because that's a whole separate topic, but like this whole process, like do you have any questions or comments, ideas on how we can do it better? Because I'm sure there's ways.
So make
Impressive
a
to
two-
see it
I
run
make
on the
a
first
two
try.
string on your ingredient object, so you can actually see it.
Oh, you can. So, well, no, you can't. You're right. 2 strings. Yeah, you could override 2 string. That's actually not a bad idea for most model objects.
So it'd be.
No, you don't have to. Yeah. Right. That's a good point. We can do that. It takes like 5 seconds.
So I'm just saying, if I were to do the debugger, it makes
We
it
can go get some beer.
more human
Am I
friendly.
saying less than a week or
I
something?
agree.
You'll be 21?
I've done it where
No,
I make
I
it
think
so
I'd
it
be comfortable
points
with
to. I make binary trees and then using pointers in the 2 string.
I can't hear
You mean
Points.
Okay.
it doesn't make sense to just
I
read
hope.
the text address of your.
That's pretty cool though.
Not really.
This
Alright, so
website.
I'll do public string.
I got somebody friends again.
I guess technically you have to override it.
45.
So
But you got
return.
enough people.
Wow.
Snake.
That's one that's been ours. I don't want to drink that.
I'm gonna keep doing all these
Mhm.
just to throw you off. So alert.
Not thrown off.
I appreciate teachers that throw me off.
And
So easy would be that fun.
wait. This works different in C#.
That would really throw us off.
Start programming through
Yeah.
C sharp.
This object is C sharp.
It's alright.
You guys fix this.
It's alright, Kevin will understand it.
1 out of 20 something. It's not bad.
Yeah, right? Good odds.
I can do it. Throw it.
2 out of 20.
So yeah, if I wanted to test this, like my 2 string, right, I can just do recipe list dot recipe list dot 0. Does that work? No, you have to get ingredients dot get 0. I don't think you can actually do 2 string, right? That should work here. Alright, and we look here. Yeah, we have our, that's the 2 string that we had. So yeah, if you were debugging, it's way easier to have a 2 string. Then you could also build one for the recipe object, but
Could actually throw that up into the for loop and use I.
true. But
We can make a 2 string for our entire recipe list.
yeah, I'm not gonna go through the 2 string.
I forget what log I is. I is
Info.
info.
Yeah. You can also use debug. Like, I guess technically what I'm doing here should not be I, it should be D, because it's a debug statement. The only really real difference it makes is when you have an app in production, you're not going to get any of the D, debug logs. You're only going to get I and E. Actually, sometimes you get I.
No V's?
What?
No V's?
No.
Excuse me.
Although I think you can do a W, WTF. Yeah, W for warning when something's not the way it should be, but it's not going to kill your app.
Warning, apple cider.
Here's a, yeah, exactly.
Allergies.
There's I don't know. There's actually like a lot of debate on whether or not warning is a helpful severity level or not. So. Hey, does anyone have any questions on this? Does anyone feel ready to do an assignment? Or not?
Yeah.
Alright. Okay.
I'll figure it out.
So how about this? I'll propose this because I think it is kind of complicated, right? I'm going to, as my deliverables for you guys, I'm going to give you guys the assignment, and then I'm also going to give you like helper classes and functions that you can use that will hopefully make this process a little less painful. And then if people are like, if I see that there are like still very few submissions or people are stuck, like okay, let me rephrase that. If no one messages on Canvas, like, and no one says, hey, I'm stuck, can you help me with this part? That's specific questions. And I'm not gonna like necessarily like try to help out. But if I get like a couple messages saying like, hey, I'm actually stuck on this specific part, like I will help publicly for those like sections that you get stuck on. But you have to ask specific questions. Like it can't just be like, how do I query the API? It'll be like, I'm getting this error from this location, help me. So if you do that, then I'll give you more like rope. Like I'm not gonna like just leave you out to dry. I'm not expecting everyone to just magically do this assignment, but
Lucky Charms, that shit.
yeah, I mean if you can, it's cool. Like it's awesome. But
Apple Studio.
Apple Cider Studio is good.
Apple Cider Studio.
Alright. Does anyone have any questions?
It's okay, the other day I forgot how to push to GitHub.
Alright. Well, I mean, one thing we can do just while we're here, because I don't remember any class yet. So,
I do,
so right here, right, we have this query. So how about we just really quick make this some kind of edit text instead of just a hard coded thing.
Butter.
So we can change our
Okay, so we're gonna change this to. We're just literally just gonna change this to text because that's just really easy. We're gonna add ID. Query. Change it to int. Why is this query missing value? Alright, cool.
It updated.
Enter a food.
An ingredient, right? No, a food. Right. Eh.
And then actually, I want to wait.
Butter. Wait, you guys never eaten butter?
It's better to eat butter than butter.
Than butter?
I don't know what that means.
I can't believe that's not
That's strange. It's so good.
Yeah, apparently, I was talking to the iOS developer who, like, so iOS, they have to use storyboards and constraints. He's like, yeah, I never use, like, the interpret layout, like, constraints. I was like, oh, all right, well.
Neither do I, of
like,
course.
yeah,
I would
like,
never use that.
yeah, so it's really up to you. But, like, the good news is if you do learn how to do it manually, you are fully equipped to handle situations where it doesn't work the way you're expecting. So it's like kind of cloud response text view. Also, I'm gonna go fast because I don't have like 3 minutes. So, alright. So I'm gonna do edit text equals new or edit text find UID what do I call it? What?
response text view. No, there's query.
Wow. Alright, I'm not sure we need to do that.
Maybe you need to rebuild the R file? What if you did
Your
a
activity is
build?
not in your model.
This is my mom. Yeah.
Okay, it's not in there.
It's just, it's not in the R class. You might need to rebuild.
Alright. did already do that. All right, cool. All right, we have our thing. I don't know what happened, but and then we're gonna get a text view. So I will call this static query. Response display. Text view. Find Alright, and then I'm actually gonna override this screen. It's a good idea. Also, you guys can talk. I don't have to sit here in silence working.
Just watching.
What's sad is I almost do this on my free time, just watching YouTube videos.
Ooh, let's watch somebody code.
There's like videos like Twitch TV.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I love going on the creative channels. Like they're just so fun. Like
That's where they cast over games, right?
sorry,
Is there a site where you can watch coding interviews?
I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe Twitch.
Probably.
I don't think that they would live stream an interview. I think that's actually against the law.
Really?
Because it
I
would
think
be
so,
like
too.
a violation of someone's privacy.
You just have to sign something, then it's legal.
Then it's legal. Hey, could you sign this before I leave the interview? Thanks.
What is it? Oh, we
Just
just
like-
wanted to watch you, and it was live
They're
streamed.
like, wait, we're gonna take a commercial break.
Like, I don't want this stuff anymore.
Yeah, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking
Should I
about?
be charging admission for this?
Especially if it's a Google interview. Heck yeah.
Dude, yeah, that would be. I don't know. I think I still have a problem with it.
Yeah.
No, actually, a Google interview, they'd probably be like, all right, here's your entire like internet history for the past 3 years. I'm like, like,
Probably.
like I don't think there's anything I should.
I would just look around. You're all human. You know, you Google search.
That was a shared computer?
Everybody's curious.
It's for the scholarships.
It's always been for the scholarships.
Gosh.
Okay, so just to kind of explain what I'm doing, I'm just using a string builder to add all the different fields, and then I'm going to do for each for my ingredients. So I'm going to builder, dot append. Before I do this, I'm going to do builder. Right. You have to add
33.
commas, so I apologize. Anyway, against my.
We're all
One
tired.
Alright,
You should hear bones.
You should not.
You should probably not hear. That's a great point.
You will think less of him afterwards.
Wait, people think up more of me?
No.
Oh.
Only when they don't know you.
Only because they don't know me.
Okay.
alright,
I know.
Using a string builder and then just, that's interesting.
yeah. It's ironic.
It's ironically delicious.
Did you not write up there?
No. Yeah, I need to.
We'll do recipe list. And so we'll
Can't
just test
remember
this out.
that. Butter.
Butter.
It's still out there. It didn't work. So let's see.
Whoa.
Alright. Well, that's our object. Let's see. Maybe just gonna go there, title. I don't think we can see. We can try.
I'm
Got a
over it
pen
already.
titled. Oh, I see.
I'm only gonna append if I have to now.
Append every character separately.
So if we go down,
You still have Apple.
you got it. Alright, I'm not doing that.
Stop trying to.
I thought the edit text was supposed to get data.
Oh, I know why. Alright. When it becomes important to understand width and height. So we can find everything. That's a lot of overkill, but that's okay. So basically what was happening is our edit text was too small. And so we weren't able to actually see like the response. It was just shrinking it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bind this underneath it, lower the height of this. Alright, well,
If you do wrap content, will you just get bigger with the data?
depends on its root layout. I mean, I hate that answer, but that is actually the case. Because I've dealt with that many times where it's like, oh, it'll just wrap the content and it doesn't actually refresh it. It totally depends on what your root layout is. But what root layout is. So, but yeah, in theory, now we can see
Oh, we along the coast.
yeah, I'm gonna get rid of that code. So here I have my ingredients. Why didn't they like
Name is ingredients.
That's trippy.
what is ingredients?
Yes, I'll take it.
I was doing some camera magic.
Lemon juice.
Yeah. They would have ideas on why it's duplicating this like 50 times. Zero to string.
What list is it again?
Oh, I'm right. Alright. It's important though before you to call the right variable. So
What were you calling?
I was calling
Ingredients, the
Let's
entire
say-
Oh.
So
So
Instead
it's
of
calling
just I.
itself. Kind of.
alright. Let's try that again. Like I said, I'll post this on GitHub. So, and I said I was going to do that. Cool. But we have our ingredient here. So back here, get rid of this dust.
Building.
Alright. And then before I call my helper, I'm going to get the text. So string,
It would be
text, data,
triple X
equals
text.
edit query dot get text dot toString, right? And then I'm going to, instead of doing Apple here, append our text data, and we'll do trim and remove white space. I think not, but we'll just trim. Cool. And I think that will work. So, well, that's not going to work.
Not running. You canceled it.
Alright. Really quick, sorry. Spacing out here. I'm gonna add a button.
Yeah, there's something that says to go.
Yeah, click view thing or click listener. go.
Cool, main activity.
Button. Oh, oh dear. What is that?
I wonder what the correct one is. It's just not liking your IDs.
I know, right?
Well, maybe it should default to something better than just button.
Button 1.
Where's that? I don't know, if it doesn't, it's fine. That, the concept is the same.
Hey.
Quick listener.
Do you see what's helpful to have separate functions? This is like a terrible way to do it. That's gonna be good. Alright. Then we'll see if it works.
Crash. Butter.
There we go.
Body butter.
That's what you need, Bones. Some body butter.
Body butter with a whip. Wow.
It even has a thumbnail for when you want to set that image view.
Oh god, body butter with a thumbnail
Alright,
and a whip.
so by show of hands, who thinks we covered a lot today? Alright, I'm glad I'm not the only one. So, alright, so maybe next week we'll do kind of like a review, sort of like how this works. And well, maybe what I'll do is for the assignment 4, we'll take like the concept I had wasn't necessarily building this API stuff, but maybe we can see if we can pull it. Like that'll be the first step, and then we can get more into like binding data from APIs and stuff like that. So I'll basically, my plan is to have assignment 4 be like iteration 1, and then assignment 5 will be an add-on on top of that. So hopefully by the end of assignment 5, you have something you could be like, yeah, check it out. That's kind of all I got for today. I'm tired, so.
Well, I'll see, and I need beer.
But yeah,
I
if
need
anyone has
beer.
any questions, feel free to come up.